So with that great segue, let's start. Can we start with you, Dan?
Sure.
And I'm sorry, I didn't go into more specifics. Dan's going to be talking primarily about paint recycling, and Ash will be focusing more on mattress recycling. But when we open it up to questions, you're welcome to direct sort of broader questions about some of the hard to recycle materials that they deal with. Is everyone comfortable with our not using microphones, or do people? Can you hear me in the back? I got one nod.
For the most part.
For the most part. Okay, we can. You're not going to have to listen to me anymore. But if you can't hear some of these folks, if you could wave your arms and back, and we'll turn on the microphones. I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, thank you. So as stated, I work with the Household Hazardous Waste Program, and as you can imagine, we get a lot of interesting things dropped off at our facilities and things that we see at our collection events. I was asked to talk about paint today because there's a few things going on in the paint world. To give you a broader picture, paint is our second largest waste stream that we see within the Household Hazardous Waste Program. And it has some interesting difficulties in its disposal. One of the problems with disposing of paint is it is truly not, especially latex, it's not considered hazardous, it's not on a hazardous waste sheet, it's no disposal special requirements. Other than you really don't want this accumulating in your landfill. It takes up space, contributes to the leachate, mucks things up, it's a liquid. So with that being said, that's kind of the approach why we want to keep the paints out of the landfill. The obvious reasons for the oil-based paint, the volatility, the flammability, some issues there, the solvent base, again, can contribute to your leachate. To give you an idea, historically, so I brought some numbers from 2011 and 2012. In 2011, the Salt Lake County Health Department disposed of a little over 400,000 pounds of paint, and that's oil-based latex combined. It's a lot of paint. In 2012, we disposed of just under 400,000, and you might think that number is because we saw less coming into the facility, but I want to clarify that's not the case. We actually had a ramped up effort for reuse and recycling that we partnered with multiple municipalities. Salt Lake City was a great partner in that effort, specifically for graffiti. So that's something we're trying to expound upon with paint, is supplying good usable paint to municipalities for the graffiti cover-up, because that can get very expensive. If you're with a municipality, you know that. We were a little sad, 2 or 3 years ago, we used to partner with a nonprofit organization out of Arizona, the Beehive Foundation, and they would send blankets and drums of paint to Mexico for graffiti cover-up and to help blankets with kids. About the time the cartels started controlling the borders and all the chaos happened down there, not one truck driver would take any of these supplies. So that was really a wake-up call to us, because we had a free outlet for 4 or 5 years for that paint, and all of a sudden we're now having to pay for the disposal. And that was a real shift in how we ran the program. And we started looking for other uses, and we were approached by a lot of cities with graffiti cover-up. We thought that was a great use. Some other things I wanted to mention that's going on with paint. I was at a national conference recently, and a great startup business out of the Midwest is starting to look at latex paint as a roofing material. And it still has some ways to go, but it's actually a fascinating process. I'm not a big enough chemist to understand the process, but they add some other components to recycled latex paint, and it can be applied on the roof with a sprayer, and it's very inexpensive. It can be colored, so you can be white to be more reflective, it can be dark to be more absorbent. Lots of possibilities with that latex roofing. And so I hope that takes off. Do a little research, see what you can come up with on that latex roofing, but I think you're going to see more of that. Something more specific that is closer to home now, we are working with many partners, DEQ, different municipalities, county. This would be a statewide bill. It's got a long way to go, a lot of hurdles to pass, but we're in discussions now with Paint Care, and that is a nonprofit arm of the American Coatings Association, which is bridge paint, architectural paint, all kinds of different coating applications. But they have a nonprofit arm that is getting involved. There's 7 states, I believe, who've passed this legislation. And they come in and basically take care of the paint disposal, collection, transportation, and the equipment related to that for local HHW programs or local municipalities. So they take that burden off, the monetary burden off. And that's something I forgot to mention. So in 2012, we spent in Salt Lake County upwards of $255,000 just to dispose of paint. So that's a lot of money that could be freed up for other projects if something like paint care or some less budgetary needs for recycling could be used. So that's something we're constantly looking for. If you've got ideas on that, we'd love to hear it, but that world keeps shifting, and so we're always looking for new alternatives. I think we've already got a question to that.
Right, aren't there earth-friendly, biodegradable paints people could be switching over to, especially ones that don't have lead in it? Because one of the reasons they took lead out of a lot of paints was because poor kids would be eating the chips because they were hungry and they get lead for it.
Yeah, we're not seeing a lot of lead paint currently. I don't know that that's as big an issue, especially what I'm seeing at our facility. I don't know about the rest of the state. And yes, there are products like that coming online more and more, lower VOCs. It still becomes an issue at landfills, and I would almost say an onus at the point of purchase for homeowners to buy the right amount. That's, education is a big part of this. So there's plenty of online calculators to help you look at how much you should buy depending on what product or what project you're doing in your home. Really make sure you're buying the right amount. And interesting conversation. I learned a little something recently. Deborah DEQ pointed out that a lot of these calculators, they don't go below the gallon size. So really do your due diligence and talk to people in these paint stores and explain to them the square footage of your product or your project and make sure you buy the right amount. So therefore, you don't have this excess that you need to hoard or bring to a facility like ours. So I think that's where it truly starts, is that doing your homework before you buy. And then we'll work on the end result. Any questions around paint or any other household hazardous waste?
Well, do you have places where people can take paint now, or does it just end up at the landfill?
So in Salt Lake County, we have numerous outlets, and we're trying to make it more and more convenient. We know that's kind of the name of the game. If it's convenient and we're putting the word out so people know to bring it to us, they'll bring it. So we have 2 permanent facilities open year-round, 1 at each landfill in Salt Lake County, and we have 2 ABOPs, which take limited hazardous waste materials, antifreeze, oil, batteries, and paint.
What's an ABOP?
An ABOP it's an acronym for antifreeze, battery, oils, and paint, and those are the only waste streams allowed at that facility. And then we have 12 to 14 community collection events where we actually go out in the neighborhood and during the summer months, and the community can bring their waste to a park or a parking lot, and we think that's a little more convenient than going out to a landfill on a Saturday.
Do you use community or city newsletters to get that out?
We heavily use local municipalities that we do the collections in. We rely on either printing something in their water bill, has been a great resource, flyers on energy bills, postings in municipal newsletters. That gets a little precarious if your PIO, your public information officer, is not really watching those outlets. We find that many times we put the information to the municipality and they print the wrong date or the wrong time. So we show up at a certain time, but then the public doesn't show up for 4 hours. That becomes a big budget problem for us, a logistic issue as well. So that's a good question.
Have you worked with homeowners associations?
That is something we're looking more at.
Because a lot of us who live in places that don't see the water bill will never get those notices.
Exactly. We're getting more aware of that. So we're trying to find some outlying advertisement, which is hard for government with not big budgets. Getting the word out is tough. So little things like magnets, partnering in libraries, putting flyers up. We find working with local municipalities really is a big partnership.
And then those disposal companies that service, complexes and areas? Have you worked with them? Because I don't imagine they like to see a bunch of that.
Nope,
come
they
through
don't,
either.
yeah, exactly. So yes, we do contact them and give them our information that we're happy to help. And DI, if you're familiar with DIs, they get dumped on a lot, so we try to work with the DIs, the Habitats for Humanity, the Restores, those folks, they get a lot dropped off on them. So we see that as another educational resource. I left out one thing we tried many years ago with latex paint, and it was quickly a disaster at the landfill. We tried it as road base to cover, because it's latex, it can be so it would harden and then you could drive over it and reduce some of the mud activity at the landfill. Well, the problem was we were putting it out and the dry time was not as quick as we hoped. So you get all the dozers and compactors driving over all this thick latex paint, all of a sudden you're binding up the bulldozers, the compactors. It was a mess. So that didn't last too long. So as you can tell, we've tried to think outside the box on this. Open to any suggestions. It's getting better. Yes?
You may want to mention, Dan, that, there are the kitty litter or some of the Home Depots and stuff sell stuff that you can put in the paint to harden it up before they throw it away if they're actually going to throw, if you don't have enough to reuse.
Yep, that's a great point. The reason I chose not to mention that, I'll be honest with you. No, I think it's worth mentioning. I just don't like to be the one to mention it because I have been pulled aside by 2 different views on that and really been hammered. So I kind of let people bring that up of their own accord. But I do appreciate you mentioning that. It is true. You can take latex paint and you can either leave the lid off and it can solidify, and that legally can go in your trash into the landfill. It's not a problem. I was approached recently by someone that you can't, if you add these, like you buy at Lowe's or Home Depot or Ace Hardware, it's a little pouch and you dump it in your latex paint and it solidifies, whatever is in that material, and I haven't done enough research on it, makes it so you can't recycle the can. I haven't looked a whole lot into that, but if you're solidifying the paint, I'm not sure that the recycle company would want your can anyway. I've also been approached by some folks with the whole conversation going on in Utah about the air problems. There are those that believe by solidifying your paint, you're contributing the VOCs to the air problem. So that's one reason I kind of shy away from that. I let people make their decisions on their own regarding that. We do have a great dry climate here. It does dry fairly quickly. Another consideration if you're going to dry the paint out, be careful if you live in an apartment complex, you don't have a lot of space or a personal driveway or garage. Worry about animals, kids, you really don't want them getting and playing in that. So be careful if you are going to aerosolize and dry it out. Great questions. Comments? Anything else? Yes, in the back.
What about putting kitty litter in?
Yep. A lot of big businesses will actually use sawdust from lumber yards.
You can put kitty litter or sawdust in there?
And it'll solidify it, and then you can put it in your trash.
So that's legal to go in the landfill?
Once it's solidified, yes. Only latex, yes.
Only latex?
Yes. The oil-based paint we have typically commingled with other solvents, things like that, and made fuel cartridges that we can give either cement kilns or diaper manufacturers, those kind of things. And that's a good outlet for the oil-based and the solvents.
And maybe we'll shift over to Ashley to make sure we give all of our presenters enough time, and then we can open it up to some more general questions.
Okay, so, yeah, this will be a little bit of a shift. So mattresses are not hazardous, but they do cause a lot of problems for us in the county and specifically at the landfill. Our landfill is, takes up a finite amount of space. So we have 550 acres on which to put our landfill, to bury our trash, basically. So we have very defined space, we have very defined limits. And we're regulated by 4 different agencies. And so at any one time, we can be audited by 4 different agencies. And so what we do is watch very closely. And so the limits that are set for us are very firm limits. The reason I say that is because when we're talking about space limits, mattresses are a huge impingement on the amount of space we have available. Landfill isn't all about space. It's not about tons. It's not about how much that stuff weighs when it comes in. It's about how much space it takes up while it's there. And I think you can all imagine sort of that concept. And then you realize that when you sleep on your mattress because it springs back and it's still comfy to sleep on the next day, and the next day, and the next day. And for the most part, retains its shape. Well, now imagine that when it goes into a landfill and we're running over it with compactors, it will still retain its shape. Even though, our compactors weigh 60 tons, and none of us weigh quite that much, and yet our mattresses respond the same way to a 60-ton compactor that they do when you and I lay down. Basically the same effect. Add to that the fact that there are no recycling options currently, no substantial recycling options available in the county. That adds to So we receive all of the mattresses that need to be disposed of in Salt Lake County. Now, how many of you have noticed springtime's coming, we're about to have neighborhood cleanups, right? How many of you, if you look, have seen a mattress in almost every pile that's out by the curb, right? Yes? Yeah. Like I've seen lots of heads nodding like, oh yeah, I get that. Well, your neighborhood is not the exception. Virtually every neighborhood, every third house will have a mattress that comes out. That adds up to a lot of mattresses. Now, if we just do some simple math, we didn't get a lot of cooperation from our mattress retailers. They didn't want to give out their market share information. But we're guessing that the number of mattresses that are disposed in Salt Lake County is around 150,000 a year. That's a lot. And they take up virtually the same amount of space as several tons of household waste. Okay. So this has become a major concern for us who are trying to protect the landfill for future use. Salt Lake County does not own any more property on which to put a landfill. Therefore, we need to preserve the one that we have, and that's sort of our mission. One of the ways we do that is by advocating for recycling, and recycling mattresses has got to be way at the top of the list. I could have brought a PowerPoint with a graph that shows the compaction rate of mattresses versus the compaction rate of all other solid waste, and you'll see that the compaction rate for mattresses is so dismal, it just doesn't even, you can't even chart it. It's so far off the chart compared to municipal solid waste. So with all that in mind, all that grim news about mattresses in the landfill, since I took this position with Salt Lake County, mattresses has been sort of my campaign, and most people know that by now. I think everybody's heard from me at one point or another. And so I really, really thought that the best way to help this situation was to incentivize a recycler to come here. If we had a mattress recycler here, we could reduce by 80–85% the number of mattresses that end up in our landfill. And then that way, the only mattresses that end up there are the ones that are found by the roadside or involved in some grisly, bloody crime or, something like that. So then, the rest, See, I want to make sure everybody's awake. Because they're all kind of looking glazed over right
They
now.
were bludgeoned by a ski, right?
Yes, right? Right, up at the resort.
Exactly.
So then, we could offer that option. Right now, people call me and say, what do I do with my mattress? And I don't have an option for them. I want more than anything to have an option. So I thought, why can't we do the same thing? Because tires are also the bane of landfills. But there's a method to dealing with tires now. And that came from the Waste Tire Act, where, you know, when you go buy your tires for your car, you pay a recycling fee and a disposal fee. That's you taking responsibility for that waste stream. Because those tires that come off your car, they don't poof away, right? They have to go somewhere. So that's you taking responsibility for your waste. Well, the same is true for mattresses. When people purchase a mattress, they could pay a recycling fee and a disposal fee. And then, since the mattress doesn't poof away either, it could go to a recycler. Now, that recycler would have the option to apply back to the state for reimbursement for some of their expenses. So this recycling fee would help fund that. That would incentivize the recycler to come. And that was really the only way I could think of to get a recycler here. Almost everybody I talked to said, it doesn't pencil out. We can't make the ends meet. We can't sell commodities at a high enough rate to pay our expenses. And I think that can be a common occurrence when we're talking about recycling of all kinds of commodities, and especially bulky waste, like mattresses and couches.
And skis.
And skis. So that was my solution to dealing with this. So I worked with a legislator and the law office, the legal counsel for the legislature, and drafted a bill that would basically run like the Waste Tire Act, with a few little tweaks here and there for different type of waste stream. And so it's currently in draft form, and would like to, start having stakeholder meetings and really put a final draft together so that for the 2015 session, we would have something to start running through committees. And that's sort of where that stands. Now there's a couple of changes. One is one of our exhibitors downstairs is thinking about coming here regardless of the legislation. Yay! So we're really excited about that, but this legislation would further make it so that they can establish themselves and not run the risk of going out of business, 6 months after they start, and then we've got a waste stream channel to them, and then all of a sudden they can't pay the bills. So I think that we still need this bill. I think we still need this legislation. Even though we've got a great possibility of an organization coming here and helping us with this waste stream, I think we still need to have this legislation. We still need to have something there that helps people take responsibility for that waste stream. So that's why everybody, when the word mattress comes up, everybody thinks of it.
Is there other states that do mattress recycling?
Yes, and several states have passed bills similar to this. Okay, I will try not to brag too heavily, but there's a nonprofit association of mattress manufacturers, and they called me about the bill we drafted, and they have drafted similar bills to ours in other states, and those other states have passed them. So I think we could pass it here. Other states have had similar concerns to the concerns I heard from our legislature, and this bill alleviates some of those concerns. So yes, other states have passed it. Other states have a couple of different ones that aren't working as well. But this model seems to be working really well. And there's a nonprofit organization in Oregon and California that have been recycling mattresses for years, and both of those states also have statutes in place.
Can I ask what they do to recycle a mattress? I don't know, sorry.
Well, they are typically manually deconstructed and broken into their components, and then those components are baled and sold on the market. But interestingly enough, these bills really have the attention of manufacturers. And so this is a really great opportunity to work with manufacturers to make a product that is more recyclable. Because that's where we need to go. We need to get it to, if we're not going to approach this from a producer responsibility, which is really hard to do, then the manufacturers and their nonprofit association can start working on ways that these mattresses can be better recycled. But for right now, that's what's happening. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, we're Springback Utah Mattress Recycling, and so yeah, we're gonna be having the mattresses manually deconstructed, and so we're a social enterprise that's dedicated to putting them back to work that need a second chance in employment. So folks that have faced prior incarceration, homelessness, addiction struggles, give them a starting point for employment, help them build skills, their confidence, get their families back, be responsible parents, so on and so forth, and then send them on to livable wage employment that they can continue on. So it's a starting point, and certainly the waste diversion that Ashley's already talked about, that we, we're actually relocating from Houston, Texas, and so it just seemed like all the research we had done pointed to us coming to Salt Lake. And so I'm from Alaska, so the mountains are, calling me back, and so we're excited to put roots down here, and really excited about the work that you're doing as an advocate for this industry, and look forward to partnering with all of you.
Where are you guys based?
We're actually currently looking for space as we speak, so we will be in Salt Lake County, but we'll ultimately be servicing the entire state.
And how do you fund your programs?
We have private investors. That's our funding source right now, but it is a sustainable business model that we're modeling off of some outfits that originally started in Nashville, also operating in Tacoma, Washington, Denver, and Charlotte. But it's a sustainable model where it's a dual revenue stream of certainly sourcing the products, as we've talked about, and also a pickup and drop-off fee.
Yes.
Yeah, I think a few years ago when I was in Salt Lake, there was limited permittable landfill space. Is that still the case?
Yes.
And how much remaining life then is available in your landfill?
Our landfill is projected to last until the year 2065, at which time we'll be out of space. Now I know that sounds like a long time, but considering that the two landfills nearest us, one in South Jordan, the Trans-Jordan landfill, and then the one not immediately north, but just north of us in Layton, both have less than 20 years on them. And it's highly likely that those waste streams will come to us, further shortening our lifespan. So we find it pretty important that we get on this space maximization now, because we know we're looking at a larger waste stream in the future, potentially, because we are the largest publicly owned landfill in the state, and we're actually the largest in the 5-state EPA region. So that's saying a lot about our landfill as a Subtitle E landfill. The rest of those landfills that can accept municipal solid waste are privately owned. And we can all kind of remember the garbage wars in some of these other states, because there's money in disposing of garbage. There is. We take in 1,500 tons a day and we charge $31 for every one of those tons. So there's money in that, and that's a really low rate, by the way. That's a really low rate.
California's like 50.
Well, most are 50 or above, and then when you start to get to California, it gets way high. But there's money in garbage, so there's a lot of competition, so the private sector is interested in that. And we don't want to squelch the private sector, but at the same time, we think that it's important for us to have a publicly owned landfill to kind of moderate those costs, because safe disposal of our waste is a public health issue. So we want to make sure that we have safe disposal for our waste, and we will always need a landfill. We just will. We're trying to manage these materials as best we can, but we will still need a landfill.
Okay, let's end on that thought, or shift over to snow sport recycling.
Yeah, they didn't leave me much time. I'm going to just go right to the questions, I'm afraid. I do have a PowerPoint presentation.
Should we dim?
Oh, sure. You
Yeah,
can
my,
get fancy.
yeah. Sure, what's up?
Make this look bad.
Yep. Good enough?
Maybe somebody,
Yeah?
yeah.
Can you still see, Greg?
What?
You can still see over
Okay, I'm obviously an Apple guy, so PC. There we go. All right. As has been said, I'm the Snow Sports Recycling Program, and we've it was a. See if I can figure out this thing here. Anyway, the program is sponsored by the Snow Sports Industries of America, which is a trade association of approximately 750 members, which encompasses hard goods, soft goods, and accessories. It's a nonprofit, but what they do is they look out for the interests of the industry. Just to give you a little bit of the market size, since 1980, the industry has produced about 1 million sliding devices. So that can include snowboards, skis, and cross-country skis. But with that also usually goes a pair of boots and bindings. Presently, there's approximately about 5 million participants in the industry, or that participate in the sport. And so what that basically works down to, we did an informal study, and with that study we found out that a family of 4 that have skied for 20 years has somewhere between 5 to 6 pairs of skis in storage. And in most of you, if any of you do ski, you'll be able to quantify and qualify that for me. But anyway, sentimental value was one of the things that we found out that a lot of them kept them. And the one that I always liked is, I'm going to keep them as rock skis. Yeah, like the next day you wake up, you say, oh, I think I'll go do some rock skiing. You know, it's not going to happen. So it's just that one of those things where people, they just hang around. The other thing is people don't like to see them. The other thing that we found out is they don't like to see them in the trash can go across, because every other piece of waste, they can stuff it down in the trash can. But when you have a pair of skis, you can't hide them in the trash. Just to give you a little overview, we initiated a pilot program with Specialty Sports Ventures, and Ken Gart, who's a luminary in the ski industry. Used to, if anybody knows the Denver area, used to be the Gart Castle was down there. He supplied us with 5 stores in the Denver metropolitan area. We then secured a grant with the state of Colorado for $420 that allowed us to go out and purchase it, and we did it with in a strategic partnership with Waste Not Recycling. They own all the equipment, and they are the ones that maintain and manage the whole program for us. We then went on to testing materials with Washington State University. They have a composite lab down there that basically, in the past, it was directed towards composite materials in the woods, or in the wood industry. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that they had worked with plastics and wood. and extruded materials. So we found them to be a good partner for us to link up with. And then we also, we also work together with the manufacturers within the industry and outside of the industry to look at ways to take these materials and repurpose them into, whether it goes back into the skis or any of the equipment they have, or into other products that could be marketable. Just to give you a little overview, we have two ways that we structure the program. We have a metro collection process, and then we also have a rural or resort process. And in the metro areas, we work together with participating retailers who are part of the SSRP. And what they do is they collect the skis from the consumer. Now, what we found is this is a great marketing tool because 67% of the people that bring their skis or bring their equipment in to drop off make some form of purchase. So now we've got people that we're taking care of our legacy, getting these old skis out of the system, but then also introducing them reintroducing them in certain situations back into the sport. But again, it helps them, look at the new things, and again, they can make upsells. We then work with consolidators or aggregators in that particular region. For instance, Kate's company is our aggregator and consolidator, Momentum Recycling, here in the Salt Lake area. And what they do is they, on a weekly basis or depending on the need, they do a milk run. They'll go around to all the participating retailers and pick up the skis, and then they'll bring it back to their facility where it's aggregated and the equipment is separated out into categories based on boot skis. One of the things that we do, and part of that process, is we have to cut the skis in half. So we were, in the beginning, we were thinking, oh, this is going to be real easy. So you use a bandsaw, or you use this. Well, all of a sudden you got all this dust created, and it creates a health hazard. So what we had to go to is a shearing process. And at the time, the cheapest shear on the market that we could find was about $6,000. So we had to come up with a low-cost solution. So we came up with a 110 motor with a hydraulic, it was a 1-ton hydraulic pump. And then we put that onto a sheet metal shear, and we've now constructed one that we can get to our aggregators on a low-cost basis. From there, once they've separated, aggregated, and put it into the Gaylords, we then, once they get a full truckload, we pick it up at their facility, and from there it goes up to our processing facility in Johnstown, Colorado, at Waste Not Recycling. The resort model is different, and we're working with we have a pilot program actually going on right now with Recycle Utah up in Park City. And what we found the best way to implement the program in those areas is to work together with advocates, or we have individuals that are very passionate about their recycling program. So those advocates then get out and they they organize these action committees, and these action committees gets the whole community involved. From there, they develop fundraisers. They also have collection events, and usually it's either annual or biannual. They either do it at the beginning of the season or at the end of the season, depending on the need. They also collect and aggregate. They consolidate and warehouse until they have enough that we can make a pickup for the full load, the truckload, and then they facilitate with the pickup. So all of you have skied, or all of you have skied or ridden on a board. I probably don't know what it's made of, but this is just a basic cross section. You're dealing with the sidewall. You've got a base that's, and the sidewall is out of polymer, as a polymer. You've got the base, which is another polymer, usually an HDP, a high density polyethylene, and then you've got your edges, which are ferrous in nature, and then you have your core. And the core varies. Most of the times on the high-end skis, it's a wood core, but then on the lower-end skis, they use a foam. And then on top of that, you have your top plate, which now is getting a lot more sophisticated because they're putting more layers of fiberglass in there. They put pieces of metal in there, top sheets, and it's getting a lot more complicated from a deconstruction standpoint. In our process, we have a 6-step process, and basically that involves we work with the primary reduction is with a 4-shaft shredder. And when I started this program, I was looking at different existing recyclers I could work with, and we identified the e-waste as probably the best because they have a very dirty stream, and they wouldn't be upset with the fact that they had fiberglass and wood and all these other components in there. So I started working with this one in Denver, this one e-waste guy, and he had a 2-shaft shredder, and he says, well, let's run it through. So what we didn't realize is that when you stick a ski in a shredder, it basically, in a 2-shaft shredder, it goes vertical on you, and all of a sudden it just pulls it straight down. So now you have these big pieces of spaghetti that you got to deal with. So we said, uh-oh, this isn't going to work. So we identified a 4-shaft shredder as a solution. So he didn't want to make the investment, so he didn't want to deal with it. So I went out, procured one, found one here in Utah, and we had it shipped over to Denver. When we get there, we ran our skis through it and it worked perfectly because in a 4-shaft shredder, it pulls it down through, but then you have a screen at the bottom, and if it goes through at a certain fraction, usually it's a 3/4 minus. Well, if it's bigger than that, it shoots it back up into the bottom 2 shaft, send it back up into the upper shaft, and then it goes through again and then gets down to size, and then it will eventually fall through the screen. So we got done with that, and we're all excited. Yeah, this is going to work. And the next thing we know, he says, "Okay, now let's run my stuff." So he's running hard drives. Well, if anybody knows the composition of the old hard drives, they have magnets in it. So all of a sudden, he runs all his hard drives. The magnets collect on the screen, and it took us approximately 6 hours, or it took him approximately 6 hours to take all the magnets off because they had a full screen. And after that run, he said, "No, I'm not interested in doing this anymore." And after getting the shredder over there and all the stuff that we went through. So again, this is just to point out this has not been without its challenges. From there, going through that shredder, we have a crossbelt magnet that pulls out the ferrous. We have a non-ferrous removal, which goes through an eddy current. We then pull out the heavies, which in our situation is stainless steel. Stainless steel has been, in my opinion, it's one of the toughest materials to get out of a waste mix, but we've come up with a solution for that. We then go into a density separation, which pulls out, we have a lot of fluff in there. You can imagine on boots and in skis and the fibers and the fiberglass and whatnot. So we have to pull that stuff out, and then eventually it goes into a granulator. We'll take it down to -1/8. So that's and what we're finding now in different applications, there's different particle sizes, and at this point we're looking at moving towards even smaller particle sizes for some of the applications that we're going to use going forward. So here's what it looks like when you pull out the metal, and you can see that that in itself is a challenge because it's really difficult to liberate all of the polymers off of some of the springs. You can see the springs, the tension springs for the bindings. You see different pieces in there. So it's a very, very dirty mix, but we're getting better at separation process there. And here's what it looks like when you grind up some skis and boots and everything else. It's quite a mess. And you can see all the different fibers, but we do have long strand fibers in here that actually work fairly well they liked it in the composite lumbers that we were putting together. So when we got the testing that we did at Washington State University was basically we looked at the physical properties, we looked at the reactive properties of our mix, our materials, and then we're looking at different types of formulation and testing. We also started to have discussions with the manufacturers from the standpoint that we wanted them to start looking at process designs. One that I mentioned earlier is the stainless steel. Is there any other materials that you can use other than stainless steel to move forward? So it makes it much easier for us on the deconstruction side of it. And again, that segues into the process modification, making sure that when they look at the design of a ski, always keep in mind the deconstruction of that ski. And they are now, and I'll show you a little bit later on here. We started looking at different types of process. This was an extruder. Extrusion was our first leap into trying to create a product, and this was a 1x6 extruded, and this is 100% ski here, except for a little bit of a lubricant. So there was enough binder, there was enough polymers inside of the ski to bind all of the other materials that we extruded at that point in time. We then looked at heat press. This is a wheel that can go on one of your garbage cans. And actually, it's a company right here in Salt Lake that produces these. It's Ace Polymers that does it. And so that we knew that we could extrude it, and we knew that it could hold up to heat press. And this here is 100% booth. Now, as we moved forward, we were looking for products that were marketable. And we decided on a substrate, because a substrate, if you can create a substrate, then it can be used in different industries. You can use it in the construction industry, the landscaping. It can be made into fixtures for stores. There's a lot of different applications for it. And one of the most promising substrate that we came across was this. It's a sandwiched product that basically, on each side of these, you can see that's the surface. It's a nice smooth surface, but I did cross-section, and that is a cross-section right there on the left, and you can see the voids inside there. But the problem that we had with the extrusion and with the heat press is that when we were trying to create the substrate, it was such a heavy product that we said, good grief, it's going to be very cumbersome to move around. So what we found was that if you take a foaming agent with a skin on the outside, then you can create a much lighter substrate. The one over here on the right, I don't think you can see it that well, but that's the capped end of it. So really this is a cross section, and right there you'll see, so it's a nice finished product all the way around with a nice smooth surface. This should start. Anyway, let me give me a second here. This is a little video that I wanted to show real quick. Can you help me out here with the magic things? But when I loaded it up, it didn't take it as a video. This is probably quick. Anyway, let me see the next one. Okay. This is a company out of, now I wish you could see this, but anyway, this is a company called Kenora, which has developed a bio-epoxy resin. Everybody kind of rolls their eyes because there's always been a lot of promises about bioresins, and the fact of the matter is a lot of them that can claim to be bioresins that have a petroleum base. So it's really, but what they've done, and they're experimenting with. This is an experimentation with Volcal, and what you would see in the video is basically they can take a ski, use their epoxy and resin, and at the end of its life cycle, they can basically put it into just for a simple base, which would be vinegar, just your common household vinegar, at about 90 degrees centigrade, and they can deconstruct the whole. As you can see on the top picture there, they've pulled out the metal, they've separated out all the different types of fiberglass. In the middle there, you can see the wood core. You can see the base of it is that black piece right there. So they can separate it out, and which is what the direction that the industry wants to go, because what it does is it creates that opportunity for us to now start to deconstruct this stuff, and it also creates a situation where you can upcycle, not so much putting it back into skis in this situation, but a lot of these companies own tennis racket companies. There's a lot of different applications that they can use in some of their other products and reuse some of their materials. So the benefits to the industry, and the benefits to any industry getting involved in putting together a recycling program, and the evolution of it is that you'll get to the point, it creates a situation where you'll have models for implementing sustainable design, reintroducing back in. We also see now that it's encouraging companies to look at the EPR programs. And one of the things that was mentioned earlier by Ashley is that a lot of stuff is being mandated and legislated. Well, we as an industry want to be proactive. We want to make sure that we're not all of a sudden blindsided with some legislation that says, hey, you guys got to do something about this. Now us being proactive. So this plays into looking at EPR programs. The possibility I discussed about upcycling into other products or even into the same products. And then for the industry, it's environmental and social initiatives. So it plays well in a public relations arena. And then and again, the most important to a lot, when you're talking to CEOs, well, how does that affect our cost structure? Well, they can realign their cost structure and actually save money in these situations. All righty, any questions? Okay.
No questions, really?
I got it.
Okay, thank you.
Oh.
What are the chances of you going upcycling into a full service? Is that a possibility? Are you going to start manufacturing these parts with your recyclable material?
Yeah, that's what we're trying to do.
Right.
Actually, some of the manufacturers are looking at it very closely. In fact, they're all in the experimenting R&D phase of it. So they really want to. It's just a matter, you're dealing, there's never been anything in place to deal with these complex. And the industry's looking at it. We're dealing with our legacy, and we're also looking to the future. And that future involves, let's look at ways and engineering it from the deconstruction standpoint on the front end, as opposed to, well, let's build it and now let's figure out how to deconstruct.
Like the rest of us.
Exactly. Yeah. Like the rest of us. So at least we're making strides that way. I mean, it's going to take time. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. But what we're seeing, and there's a nice cottage industry here. There's what I call boutique brands, small brands that are starting, and they're looking more at sustainability as part of their model. Some of the larger corporations or larger companies are a little slow to move towards it, but they have different models, and it takes a lot of time. It takes committees and everything else to get anything to move one way or the other. So that's basically it. Any other questions? How many of you are skiers or snowboarders? All right. Okay, well, hopefully we're going to have the program up and running here in the Salt Lake area next year. So if you have any, when I mentioned the 4 to 5 pairs, I saw a lot of people shaking their heads. Go to our website, which is snowsrp.org, and you can find out all the drop-off locations. And thank you very much. Oh, one more question.
How many skis have you had? You're like, oh, I can't shred this.
How many have I what?
Kev, you're like, oh, this is too good of a ski to shred.
In the beginning we tried to, there was some that had historical value to them, and we really tried to pull out those because we're going to take them and auction them off and put the proceeds back towards the program. And I quickly found out that if you don't have if you don't have people that are qualified to identify what is a good ski, and I had like 3 boxes of skis that were old head standards and headmasters and stuff like that, and we had a kid come in that was a temp. He went and he put them. Yeah, they all went through the recycling program, and I was like, and for me it was an epiphany. I said, oh, we're going to be having this program all over the U.S. There's no way that we're going to be able to get qualified people, and again, to be able to identify which ones, because there's a ski museum up in Colorado, and so what we're doing to help them is, like, they'll have a specific ski, and if we're in the Colorado market, then they'll say we're looking for this, and then we try to, we'll put an APB out there for it and try to find it for them if we can. So, yes.
I sell stuff online. I sell stuff on eBay. I sell comics. I've sold on Amazon.com, Half.com, and I've dealt with antique dealers as well. What you do on that, if you think these may be some antique skis that are worthwhile, you get in contact with an antique dealer that's one's going to trust, you can trust, it's not going to try to cheat you, and just have them check it out. If it is, do a consignment sale with it. I'll bring you some money.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, I think we're out of time, but let's, before we break, if everyone could fill out their little survey around their table, let's put our hands together and thank our presenters.
Last built nylon.